Hey guys, I'm MG, and today we'll be looking at The Karate Kid Part 2, which is an American martial arts drama film, which was directed by returning director John G. Avildsen and written by returning writer Robert Mark Harmon. However, we don't have time to feel nostalgic today, but we have time to review, so why don't we do that right now? This film is so frustrating because it was so close to being excellent, but man, some stuff in it is just not the vibe. Let's start with the positives. Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are just as endearing as ever, with a ton of funny and emotional moments that benefit their chemistry really well. And I still think Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita capture the same charm that they showed in the first film. I also really like the new supporting characters. Kumiko was really sympathetic, Tamlin Tomito was really natural in her acting, and her chemistry with Daniel was really sweet, and is pretty much on par with Daniel's chemistry with Ale. Yuki was a really nice character, and her scenes with Mr. Miyagi are really heartwarming, and is given the weight it deserves. Plus, Noble McCarthy's acting was really strong, that fitted her character really nicely. The music by Bill Conti is much better than his already amazing score from the first film. The setting is also really interesting, and is honestly better than the first film, because of how cool it looks, and how we get to spend time in it. The action sequences are inferior to the first film, but are still pretty tense and fun, and I think people have been criticizing them too much. The cinematography looks really good and shows the environment in an interesting way. The production design is filled to the brim with amazing sets that fit the story and setting really nicely, and there's a ton of strong moments. The opening was really strong, and Miyagi's hunk was really funny. The ice breaking and the dance scenes were really pleasant to watch, and the emotional moments doesn't just work, it soars. My favorites being when the characters grieve over Miyagi's father's death. Those were really flaming effective, and are amongst one of the best moments out of the entire franchise. This movie just has a lot of amazing aspects that are unfortunately mixed in with not very good ones. Like, there's no story here whatsoever, and the scenes don't really flow all that well, since this movie has so many plot points that are just given out and nothing else. Like, in the first film, there was clearly a story that made all the scenes flow really naturally, and always knew when to cut back and forth, from Miyagi training Daniel, and Daniel falling in love with Ali. But with this film, it just focused on one plot point for like half of the movie, and for the other half, those scenes are enjoyable, but are just thrown out there with little to no reason. And this would have been fine if this movie was paced properly. In fact, that's another thing. This movie has super weird pacing, with where each plot point isn't paced all that well, like they focus on Mr. Miyagi's father for 50 minutes. And don't get me wrong, those were some of my favorite moments in the film, but some of it was slow, like the airplane scene and the legacy footage, and doesn't contrast well with the other plot points because of how the movie focuses on it for too long. And when we actually do get to those other plot points, they feel kind of rushed, since the movie wasn't really sure of what it wanted to tell for its storytelling. And I wanted more of those points, like I wanted to see the romance in this film a lot more. But the pacing just kind of said otherwise, which unfortunately resulted in these issues. And my last major problem with this film was the villains. Let's talk about Sato first. He was an old friend of Miyagi's that felt betrayed after Miyagi left him to Okinawa, and Sato really wants to get revenge. That's an interesting concept that would have told us about Miyagi's past, but this concept isn't really well fleshed out. We hear all about that conflict, but I feel like it was really shallow, and doesn't have a dramatic weight that it could have had if they had delved deeper into their past. But they didn't, and Sato himself isn't really good. He's not a terrible villain, like his plan was really sinister, which added some stakes to his film. He isn't one note, like he has some respect for others, and isn't always mean-spirited. And Danny Kamekona was really good in a couple of scenes. But Sato just doesn't really feel like a threat as much as he should have been, and the acting by Danny was really goofy most of the time, but I think drags this character down even more. And I think the reason for this was the directing. Danny has his moments with strong acting, but I think the director told him different instructions of how to act in different scenes, which is sad since Danny clearly knows how to act, but the director made him inconsistent with his voice, which is just such a shame. And the climax just made the character really stupid. Like, he is under a wreckage in this storm, and is ranting about Mr. Miyagi winning because of this, instead of worrying about his own life. And when Mr. Miyagi does save him, he instantly forgives him. Wait, how does that make any sense? It seemed that his rage burned so bright, and then it's just all gone after Miyagi saves him. And how in the world is that logical in any sense? Anyways, I think I talked about Sato enough, so let's move on to the next villain, Chosen. Where do I even begin? I think my biggest issue with Chosen is his motivation to kill Daniel. Like, he's going on about how Daniel dishonored him, and I don't even know what Daniel did. So Chosen is mad at him for no reason, and is even willing to kill Kumiko in front of everyone else, after no one did anything to him, and is not even thinking about his consequences, which makes him one of the most stupid villains I have seen in quite some time. Also, he's a big crybaby as well. I mean, he literally runs in the flaming storm after Sato has said that he is dead to him, and it makes no sense at all. The only positive things I can say about him were Yuji Okamoto's acting, because he was really good in his role. I liked Chosen's first scene, which made him look like a threat, and Chosen felt like a true obstacle towards the characters, but man, his motivation is stupid, and the character's a big crybaby, which gets rid of his entire menacing presence. The villain of the first film, Johnny, worked because A, he's not a crybaby, which makes him menacing, and B, he had a simple motivation that made sense because of his past with Ali and him being a teenager, which felt natural to his jealousy towards Daniel for spending time with his ex-girlfriend. But Chosen has so many layers to his character that don't link at all and makes no sense. So, pretty bad villains, unfortunately. I do have other problems as well, like the repetition of the word coward was really getting on my nerves. This guy in a hat was kind of annoying. I wish there was more action scenes. Sato knowing when Mr. Miyagi was coming in Okinawa doesn't make a lot of sense. And overall, this film is unfortunately a really misguided one. Don't get me wrong, I do really like this film and it has a ton of exceptional aspects, but it's also frustrating because this film was so close to being perfect, and it just barely missed that opportunity. Ah well, still a good movie. 7.8 out of 10. Goodbye everyone, and thank you for watching. Bye.